Hello and welcome to another weekly update. Back inside for this one. The weather, whilst very nice last time, has turned back to more traditional British weather. It is raining at the moment, so I thought I'd stay inside. But there's plenty to talk about this week. So I did a blog post that went out today about developing in Teams, and I'm developing a bot at the moment in Teams, which I'll talk about more sort of in the future. But there's a couple of different ways that you can debug your code locally using the bot framework, and one of those is an emulator. There is a local emulator you can use which will emulate bot framework messages, and that's great and that's very useful for getting started. But what you'll find quite quickly is that if you're doing anything, let's say in Teams, so you're writing a Teams bot that replies to messages, or when the bot gets mentioned in channels and things like that, you get slightly different information come through. It's that meta information about the channel that they're in, the context in which that message was being sent, who sent it, and everything like that you sometimes need, depending on the type of bot you're creating and the type of work it's doing. And the emulator doesn't really give you that. So what you can actually do is have commands that you send in Teams go to your bot, but your bot code is running locally. You can do all that using a tunneling service called ngrok, and in the blog post I go into sort of the detail about how you set it up. It's very easy to set up, very easy to use, very powerful. It's really cool. If you've not tried it before, you should, because it will make this whole process really easy. It's one of the problems with deploying to like managed service code like bot framework, where you push your code up and then it runs somewhere else in some other environment. You don't have that full debug, breakpoint, inspect kind of control that you need sometimes when you're writing code. ngrok gives you that. It's really good. So it's free as well. There is a paid plan as well. It gives you extra features you should definitely look at. But if you just want to do the free one, that's cool as well. So yeah, like I say, blog post up today. I'd recommend going and reading it if you do any kind of development on bot framework, anything for Teams, or really any other services. It's great for mobile, I imagine, as well. So definitely worth checking that out. Okay, I'm not going to spend too much time on this next one because it is kind of outside my area of understanding, but I know it is very important, and that is GDPR. There is a great blog post by the bot framework team all about GDPR and how they can help you help your users, and how they can help you be GDPR compliant, and it's some of the calls that you need to make to get back the data that you need to be able to service those GDPR requests. So if you've written bots and they're now live and you are in Europe, you owe it to yourself to read this, and because you'll need to do so to become GDPR compliant in a sensible way. Your bots are also they're a source of information. They're gathering information about users, and depending on what your bot does, there'll either be more or less information. But there's information gathered throughout bot framework as well for the bot to do its work. So it's definitely worth reading that information and getting that information you need to kind of help make the best you can of this this new GDPR world. What else? Okay, so blog post on ZDNet, which I thought was interesting, by Mary Jo Foley, about bots, talking about the things Microsoft are working on. I've already spoken about calendar.help before. I think it's a great idea. It's a cool bot that helps find gaps in your calendar. That whole process of are you free next Wednesday? No, but I could do next Tuesday. What time? All that stuff calendar.help takes and does for you. It's like your personal assistant. It's amazing. There's something new that I think was probably the reason for this blog post, is called the Switchbot project, which I've not heard of before. And it's something, it only came out because it was in a research paper, so it's kind of not been kind of hugely marketed or anything like that. It really was, it was just kind of mentioned in a research paper. And the aim of the bot is to help workers detach and then re-engage at the start and end of their work days. So it's an interesting idea, and if you read productivity posts, blog posts and stuff, which I do as well, there's a lot to be said for getting to the end of the day and doing something, be it go for a walk, like a walking commute home, like a mass transit journey home, something to clear your head and get you out of work mode and into home mode. And likewise, coming back in the morning, something you just need to kind of spin yourself back up. You need to get all those plates that you were spinning yesterday, you need to get them all back on the end of their whatever it is, plate spin on sticks, I suppose. And Microsoft have developed a bot which they reckon is good at doing this, and it helps get workers up to speed again in the morning. I kind of like the idea of that. I kind of like the idea of and I don't really know if this is how it works, but I like the idea of kind of offloading everything you've done in a day to a bot, offloading all the things that you need to remember and get them out of your head, and knowing that they're safe, and then coming back in the morning and having the bot kind of feed all that back to you to get you back up to speed and back up and running with where you were. It sounds pretty cool. It sounds it's like a good idea. It sounds like a good use for a bot. It sounds like an interesting intersection between some psychology, some research, how people work, productivity, and bots as well. So it'd be interesting to see if anything comes out of that. It might just be a research project. Sometimes these research projects don't go anywhere. Sometimes they show up as products and as services. So interesting to see where that goes. And then finally, the only other thing I want to tell you about is, so this is kind of IT pro-ish, but it's also developer focused. So Office 365 has many different endpoints, many different IP addresses, and if you're a large enterprise, that you may need to know what these are so you can whitelist them, so you can understand them, and Microsoft have always published what those endpoints are. What they've actually done now is categorize those endpoints into 3 different buckets, and it's really based around the type of connection they are and the type of flow of those traffic that traffic under those endpoints should be. So the 3 categories are optimize, allow, and default. Optimize, they reckon that's low latency stuff. It should bypass proxy, it should bypass SSL break and inspect. It's like your real time, it's your video, your audio, it's all that kind of stuff. There's the next level down, which is allow, which is not so critical, but also you should probably not proxy it, and you should have good connectivity for those things. And then there's a third bucket of default, which is everything else, do what you want. The interesting thing for developers is that now there's actually a web service behind all of this. So there is actually a web service, a public web service you can go to. I'll put a link in the notes, where you can get always the latest list of IP addresses and the latest list of all these endpoints and the category they're in and what they all do. That's quite interesting. It's an interesting opportunity for developers to come up with a cool idea for how they might use this. I'm still thinking about how you might use this. It might be good for networking to kind of have an inspection tool. It might be useful for system administrators to be able to put in an address and have something come back and say that's an Office 365 address, or it's not an Office 365 address. That might be useful, and there may be other kind of useful things you could do in that as well. So interesting for developers, interesting for IT guys as well, because it's useful to have a list. It's useful to have it categorized as well. And there's some specific guidance now about what you should do with each of these endpoints based on the category that they're in. All right, that's everything for this week. Have a lovely weekend, and I will talk to you again next week.